They thought my fear was weakness. They laughed as I gripped the armrest, fighting the panic. But they didn't expect who would sit beside me and what that seat would mean. The terminal at Los Angeles International buzzed with the restless rhythm of travel, rolling suitcases clattering across tile, announcements echoing like half-remembered prayers, children tugging at weary parents. I sat rigid in a plastic chair near gate C-23, palms damp, heart drumming against my ribs like it wanted out. I hated flying, not just disliked, the way someone complains about airplane food or tight legroom. No, for me, it was panic. Every vibration, every ding, every unseen bump in the sky became proof that the ground might never welcome me again. My coworkers knew it too well. We were traveling for a tech expo in Chicago, a trip the company insisted would boost team morale. They surrounded me in the waiting area, their laughter pitched just loud enough to sting. "Don't grip the armrest too hard this time," Mark said, smirking. "We don't want you breaking company property." The others chuckled. "Maybe they'll let you sit in the cockpit," added Rachel. "You know, hold the pilot's hand during takeoff." Heat rose in my face. I kept my eyes fixed on the boarding door, as if staring hard enough might open it sooner. Anxiety was cruel. It didn't just squeeze your chest, it put you on display, like prey in a glass box. A boarding announcement cut through their laughter. Groups 1 and 2 stepped forward, crisp in their business suits, confident in their carry-on. My group, 28, was still far away. I remained seated, nails biting crescents into my palm. Rachel leaned closer, lowering her voice only slightly. "Honestly, how do you even function at airports? You're like a child in a storm." The laughter reignited. I swallowed hard, willing myself not to break. But inside, I was shrinking, folding into the kind of silence that humiliation always builds. When my group was called, I boarded alone, pushing past their mock grins. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of stale coffee and recycled oxygen. I slid into my window seat, row 17, already gripping the armrest, though the plane was still tethered to the ground. Passengers filed in. My co-workers claimed seats across the aisle, still whispering, still smirking. My chest tightened, breath shallow. I knew the signs too well. The panic was building, a tide rising against a fragile dam. The aisle filled with chatter, and then she appeared. A flight attendant, auburn hair tied neatly back, eyes kind but sharp, like someone trained to notice who's drowning even in shallow water. She leaned down, speaking softly. "Everything okay here?" I tried to nod, but my throat closed. Mark snorted across the aisle. "He's fine, just terrified of flying. Happens every time." Her gaze flicked toward him, cool as steel, then returned to me. "You don't look fine," she said gently, "and that's okay." Before I could answer, she turned, murmured something to another crew member, and returned with a decision already made. She slipped gracefully into the empty seat beside me, buckling the belt in one smooth motion. "Until we're steady in the air," she said, her voice calm as still water. "I'm right here." Mark's smirk faltered. Rachel raised her brows. Around me, the cabin seemed to shift, mockery replaced by silence, anxiety by the first fragile thread of safety. For the first time since boarding, I breathed. The door sealed with a heavy thud, and the cabin lights dimmed. The murmurs of passengers faded into the mechanical hum of engines spooling to life. My fingers clenched the armrest so tightly, I thought the plastic might crack beneath them. The flight attendant beside me, her name tag read Claire, rested her hands lightly on her lap. She didn't push or preach, she simply sat, her presence like a weight against the tide of panic threatening to pull me under. "You're safe," she whispered, as the plane began to taxi. "Every bump, every sound, it has a purpose. I'll explain if you'd like." I nodded, barely. My co-workers across the aisle watched, whispering behind smirks. Mark leaned toward Rachel. "Can you believe this? Babysat at 30 years old? I wanted to disappear." But Claire glanced at them just once, her eyes sharp as glass, and the whispers died in their throats. Then she turned back to me, her voice softer again. "That shudder you'll feel? That's just the wheels locking before takeoff. Nothing more." The engines roared, the cabin pressed back, and the plane lunged forward down the runway. My breath caught, chest tightening like a fist. Claire's hand rested gently on my forearm. Not intrusive, just steady. "Count to 10 with me," she said. "By the time we're there, we'll already be in the sky." "1," I whispered. "2," she said, her voice calm, grounded. We reached 10. My stomach dropped as the wheels left the ground, but her words cut through the noise. "That's it. We're flying, and you're okay." For a moment, I almost believed her. The city lights fell away, swallowed by darkness. Clouds wrapped the cabin in shadows, and every vibration jolted me. Claire spoke again, matter of fact. "That's turbulence from climbing. Perfectly normal, like driving over a bumpy road." I exhaled, shaky but present. Across the aisle, Rachel muttered, "Pathetic." But her voice sounded smaller now, drowned by the steady hum of flight and the quiet shield Claire had built around me. When the seatbelt sign chimed off, passengers unbuckled. Claire didn't move. She stayed beside me, arms folded loosely, scanning the cabin like a sentinel. "Why do you hate flying?" she asked gently. My throat tightened. "Because I can't control it. Every sound feels like the end. And when people laugh," my voice cracked. "It's like they're waiting for me to collapse." Claire nodded. "Panic thrives in silence and shame. They feed each other. But you're not broken. Your body just speaks louder than most people's." Her words landed heavier than the engines. I stared at the tray table, ashamed of the tears pooling in my eyes. "You don't have to hide it," she continued. "Not here. Not now." I shook my head. "They'll never let me forget." "Then let me remember something different," she said. "That you sat here, terrified, but you didn't run. You boarded. That's courage." Her tone was firm, almost commanding. Not pity, respect. And it lit a small spark I hadn't felt in years. The captain announced we had reached cruising altitude. Claire unbuckled, rising gracefully. "I'll check on others," she said. "But I'll be back. You're not alone on this flight." She left me with those words, and for the first time, the cabin didn't feel like a trap. It felt survivable. Mark smirked again, leaning across the aisle. "Got yourself a babysitter, huh?" I didn't answer. For once, I didn't have to. Because somewhere between the runway and the clouds, something had shifted. The fear was still there, but so was the knowledge that I wasn't facing it alone. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything. The seatbelt sign chimed on again, light chop ahead, and the cabin settled into that wary hush people wear when they pretend not to be afraid. Claire reappeared beside me with a paper cup. "Ginger tea," she said. "Warm, helps the body believe it isn't in danger." I wrapped both hands around the cup like it was a small fire. Across the aisle, Mark clicked his tongue. "VIP service," he muttered. Rachel smirked at her phone, thumbs flying. Claire didn't bite. She looked at me, not through me. "All right," she said quietly. "We're going to name things. The rumble under your feet is airflow over the landing gear doors. The occasional thump is the flaps adjusting. And your heartbeat? Loud? Yes. Dangerous? No." The plane wove through a thin sheet of cloud. Overhead, bins creaked. A few gasps popped like kernels around us. Claire anchored her palm on the armrest, a steadying metronome. "In through the nose for 4, hold for 2, out for 6, she coached. I followed, surprised to find the breath where I thought there was none. Mark leaned into the aisle. "Hey, is there a punch card for this?" he asked, loud enough for the surrounding rows. 10 panics, 1 free blanket. A couple of chuckles answered him. Thin laughs from people who didn't want to take sides. Claire stood, and the air around us changed shape. Not louder, firmer. "Sir," she said to Mark, even and professional, "you are welcome to read, sleep, or enjoy your flight. What you're not welcome to do is ridicule another passenger." "It's just a joke," he replied, palms out, a stage shrug. She didn't blink. "Turbulence is common up here. Unkindness doesn't have to be." She turned slightly, so both he and Rachel were in her field of view. "This is a safety-forward cabin. That includes psychological safety. Do I have your cooperation?" Mark's mouth opened, then closed. Rachel sank back into her seat, the glow of her screen dimming as if embarrassed for her. The rows around us shifted. A few nods, a released breath here and there. The aisle, which had been a corridor for quiet cruelty, became something else, a line in the sand. Claire lowered her voice for me again. "You're doing well." "I don't feel well," I whispered. "You don't have to feel brave to be brave," she said. "You're here. That counts." A man from 2 rows back stood, waiting for the restroom. Mid-40s, neat blazer, conference badge peeking from his pocket. He glanced at Mark, then at me, then at Claire. "Excuse me," he said softly to her. "Thanks for that." He gave me a quick, human nod, the kind that says "I see you," and turned away. Another ripple passed through the cabin. Someone across the aisle closed their laptop. The tension, once elastic and mean, lost a little stretch. Claire crouched to eye level. "Do you want a different seat until we smooth out?" she asked. "We have an open bulkhead row. More space can help the nervous. Situ." "What about them?" I asked, flicking a glance at my coworker. She followed my eyes, then shook her head. "They'll be fine wherever they sit." Before I could answer, the intercom crackled. The captain's voice was calm, almost fatherly. "Folks, we're in some light to moderate chop for the next 10 minutes. Perfectly safe. Flight attendants will remain seated until we're through it." Claire looked at the belt above her shoulder, then at me. Decision. She pressed the attendant call button and, when a colleague answered from the galley, requested a temporary jump seat trade for the patch of bumps. 30 seconds later, she slid back into my row, buckled in, and rested her head lightly against the seat, not hovering, not coddling, just there. Rachel finally spoke, small and brittle. "This is ridiculous." The man with the blazer, returning from the restroom, paused at their row. "It isn't," he said kindly. "I used to white-knuckle every takeoff. People helped me. You could try that." He sat again without flourish, as if he'd merely adjusted an air vent. The chop eased. The sign dinged off. Claire unbuckled, half rose, then hesitated. "One more thing," she said to me, almost conspiratorial. "I used to have panic attacks. On buses, different vehicle, same brain. It took time. And people. That's all this is. Time and people, okay?" Something in my chest unclenched. Not all at once. More like a zipper easing down. "Okay," I said. She smiled, then stood. "I'm going to check the mid-cabin. I'll be back." As she moved away, Mark exhaled theatrically and grabbed his phone. "Can't wait to tell the team about our in-flight therapy session." He started typing, angle tilted so I could see, "Babysitting at 30, courtesy of Flight 482. Before the message could leave, a voice from behind us spoke, measured, unmistakably authoritative. "I wouldn't send that if I were you." We turned. The man in the blazer was on his feet again, badge now visible. Evan Cole, Director, People and Culture, North Division. The logo beneath it? Our company's? My company. Mark blinked. "Evan, you're on this flight?" Evan's mouth tugged into a rueful smile. "On my way to the same expo you are, and apparently to the same post-flight conversation." He slid the phone from Mark's hand, not roughly, just decisive, and handed it back screen dark. "Delete it. Then spend the rest of the flight deciding if you want to be the colleague who makes teams smaller or the one who helps them breathe." Rachel stared at the seat back. Mark flushed, jaw working without words. The nearby rows had gone silent again, but not with fear, with attention. Evan looked at me. "You okay?" I nodded, surprised to find that it was partly true. "Getting there." "Good," he said. "For what it's worth, that took guts." He glanced down the aisle toward the galley, where Claire disappeared and reappeared in the choreography of service. "And good leadership, too." He sat. The cabin exhaled in unison, an invisible pressure valve opening. Claire returned a few minutes later with a fresh cup and a card the size of a boarding pass. On it, a list. Box breathing, 426. Label sensation, not stories. Cold bottle to wrist. Ask for help early. Tools, she said. If you forget them, I've got more. I tucked the card into my wallet, like a talisman that believed in me instead of magic. Outside, the sky cleared to a blue so clean it looked manufactured. Inside, the balance had shifted. Not because the plane smoothed out, but because someone, several someone, had decided the aisle was not a place for mockery, but for mercy. I sat back. My heart was still loud, but it was not alone. The seatbelt sign went dark, and with it, the cabin loosened into motion. Overhead, bins clicked, trays unfolded, voices rose in their usual mid-flight rhythm. But for me, everything inside still pulsed like a wound, fear, shame, and something else growing beneath, resolve. Claire returned with a tray balanced in one hand, distributing drinks with her practiced ease. When she reached our row, she placed a can of sparkling water on my tray, unasked. "Hydration steadies the nerves," she said, almost like a secret. Mark accepted a soda without meeting her eyes. Rachel avoided her gaze entirely. The earlier smugness had thinned, replaced by the brittle quiet of people realizing the spotlight wasn't on them anymore. I sipped, hands still trembling. Claire crouched beside me again, her tone casual, almost conspiratorial. "How's the body now?" "Still tight," I admitted. "Notice it," she said. "Name it. Don't fight it." I inhaled, chest heavy, jaw clenched, shoulders locked. "Good," she said. "That's honesty, not weakness." And then she straightened, smiling faintly before moving on. Something about her calm gave me permission I'd never had before. For the first time on a flight, I didn't try to hide the tremor in my hands. I let them rest openly on the tray, visible, real. And instead of laughter, I caught something else: curiosity, even empathy, from nearby passengers. Half an hour passed. The captain announced clear skies and smoother air ahead. Claire slipped back into the seat beside me, off duty for a rare moment. "You're handling this better than you think," she said. I exhaled. "Feels like I'm barely holding on." "That's what courage feels like," she replied simply. Across the aisle, Mark shifted uncomfortably. Rachel scrolled through her phone, but her screen brightness couldn't hide the heat in her cheeks. Their armor was cracking. Then Evan, the director from our company, rose and walked toward them. He spoke low, but I caught fragments. Team culture, accountability, respect. Mark nodded stiffly, Rachel biting her lip. When Evan returned to his seat, the aisle felt different, heavier with unspoken consequence. I turned back to the window. Clouds stretched below like endless white fields, sunlight glittering off their peaks. For once, I wasn't counting seconds to land. I was present, afraid, yes, but present. Claire glanced at me. "Do you notice the shift?" "What shift?" She gestured subtly around the cabin. "They're watching you, not as a joke, as proof that someone can fight fear in real time. Do you know how rare that is?" The thought startled me. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't pathetic. I was a mirror reflecting something other people recognized, their own hidden panic, their own buried fears. My pulse slowed. Not much, but enough. The intercom dinged. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our meal service. Please remain seated as carts move through the aisles." Claire rose again, professional mask sliding back into place. "I'll be near," she said, "but you don't need me in this seat anymore." I wanted to protest, but she was right. The ground inside me had shifted, just enough to stand on. As she wheeled the cart forward, Evan leaned across the aisle. "Daniel," he said quietly, "after this conference, we'll talk about culture, about how teams treat each other. I think you might have more to teach than you realize." Heat surged in my chest, but this time, not from shame, from possibility. For the first time since boarding, I reclined into my seat, shoulders easing against the headrest. The engines droned steady, the air smooth, and inside me a new truth whispered, maybe I wasn't broken, maybe I was just beginning. 2 hours later, the captain's voice filled the cabin with the practiced calm of someone who had said the same words 1,000 times. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our initial descent into Chicago. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." My chest tightened. Descent had always been the hardest part. The shift in gravity, the drop in air pressure, the invisible grip of atmosphere closing in. It all felt like a rehearsal for falling. Claire reappeared, gliding down the aisle with her practiced efficiency. When she reached me, she bent slightly, voice low. "This is where nerves spike. Perfectly normal. Stay with the breath." I nodded, swallowing hard. Across the aisle, Mark chuckled. "Here we go again," he muttered. Rachel smirked, but didn't meet my eyes. The plane tilted downward, engines adjusting with a groan. My pulse quickened. I pressed my back into the seat, eyes locked on the window. Clouds blurred past in streaks, the world tilting, narrowing. Claire stayed by my row, steady. "Remember the card? Label it." I forced the words out, ears popping, chest tight, heart fast. "Good," she said softly. "And yet, you're still here, still breathing." The overhead bins rattled with turbulence. Cups shook, and gasps dotted the cabin. Mark laughed again, louder this time, his voice slicing through. "Relax, buddy. We'll all go down together if it happens." A few heads turned sharply. The mood in the cabin shifted, no longer amusement, but irritation. Passengers frowned, whispered. The man in the blazer, Evan, rose halfway, catching Claire's eye. She gave the smallest nod, and he sat back, waiting. Then Claire did something I'll never forget. She crouched in the aisle, her voice projecting just enough for nearby Rose to hear. "For anyone who's nervous, what you're feeling is normal. A plane has to descend to land safely. Every sound, every bump, every shift, it's all part of getting you home. Fear doesn't mean danger. It means you care about your life. And that," she glanced at me, then swept her eyes across the cabin, "is nothing to laugh at." The words hung in the air, quiet but unshakable. Mark shrank into his seat, face flushed crimson. Rachel shifted uncomfortably, tugging at her sweater sleeve. A ripple of nods and murmurs of agreement passed through the rows. Someone clapped once, then stopped, embarrassed. But the sound had already cracked the silence. I inhaled, and this time, the breath came easier. The skyline of Chicago emerged through the clouds, tall steel needles catching the last red light of sunset. The plane rocked, adjusting. My co-workers sat smaller than ever, stripped of their smugness. Evan leaned forward, catching my eye across the aisle. His expression wasn't pity. It was something heavier, recognition. Claire stood, bracing herself as the descent continued. She gave me one final look, quiet but certain. "You're doing it," she mouthed, and she was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't clinging only to fear. I was holding on to dignity. The wheels dropped with a jolt. Gasps spread, but I didn't flinch, because something had shifted. The shame no longer belonged to me. The city lights of Chicago shimmered beneath us, streets glowing like rivers of fire against the dark. The engines hummed lower, the cabin tilting with controlled grace. My throat tightened, but I breathed the way Claire had taught me. In for 4, hold for 2, out for 6. The wheels struck the runway with a roar that rattled bones and bins alike. A chorus of gasps swept the cabin, followed by nervous laughter. My fingers clenched the armrest, but I didn't break. I rode the vibration until it slowed into the steady rumble of rubber on asphalt. Applause broke out in pockets. Claire caught my eye as she passed with practiced calm, her lips curving into the faintest smile. Beside me, Mark exhaled loudly, muttering, "Drama over." But his voice no longer carried power. It sounded thin, desperate, irrelevant. Rachel leaned against the window, avoiding everyone's gaze. The intercom chimed. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chicago O'Hare. Please remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop." Evan rose slightly, catching the attention of the row. His voice was calm but authoritative. "Mark, Rachel, when we disembark, you'll join me for a conversation. We don't tolerate humiliation as entertainment in our teams. That ends today." Their faces froze, pale as paper. A murmur spread through nearby rows, passengers exchanging looks of quiet satisfaction. Justice, subtle but undeniable, had entered the cabin. I stayed silent, letting the moment wash over me. For once, I wasn't the target. I was the witness to their reckoning. The plane rolled toward the gate. Claire stopped by once more, leaning down. "Still breathing?" "Yes," I said. My voice was steady, surprising even me. "Good," she replied. "That's your win. Remember it." The seatbelt sign pinged off. Passengers stood, tugging at bags. The aisle clogged with the usual scramble. My co-workers kept their eyes down, stripped of bravado. Evan motioned for me. "Daniel, walk with me after we land." Something inside me shifted again. Not just relief, but a fragile pride. Maybe this flight hadn't broken me. Maybe it had built me. As the jet bridge connected and the doors opened, I stepped into the cool air of Chicago. The chaos of the terminal waited, but it no longer terrified me. Because somewhere between fear and ridicule, between anxiety and courage, I had discovered a truth. The seat you occupy doesn't define you. The way you endure it does. The jet bridge funneled us into the terminal, where the smell of coffee and the static of announcements wrapped around weary travelers. People hurried past, dragging luggage, reuniting with loved ones. For me, Each step felt heavier, not from fear, but from the weight I was finally setting down. Evan walked just ahead, his badge swinging against his blazer. Mark and Rachel trailed behind, shadows of themselves. My co-workers' laughter, once knived, had dulled into silence, and silence, for once, was mercy. Claire stood at the gate, bidding farewell to passengers with her practiced smile. But when I passed, her hand brushed mine briefly. "Remember the card," she whispered. "And remember this, you flew." The words carved into me deeper than turbulence ever had. I nodded, unable to speak, but she saw it in my eyes. Evan slowed his stride until he matched mine. "Daniel," he said, tone measured, "your work, your presence, it matters. I'll be raising what I witnessed here, not your fear, but your resilience." My breath caught. For years, I had carried anxiety as a scarlet letter, proof of weakness. Now, someone was telling me it was evidence of strength. At baggage claim, the carousel churned. Suitcases thudded onto the belt. Mark and Rachel stood apart, stiff, waiting for the storm they knew was coming. Evan gestured to them, then back to me. "Go ahead, reclaim your evening. I'll handle this." I wanted to thank him, but instead I simply nodded. Words felt too small. My bag appeared. I lifted it, the weight oddly lighter than before. The terminal stretched ahead, buzzing with strangers, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a road. Outside, the Chicago night was brisk, sharp with possibility. Taxis honked, neon signs flickered, the city alive with its endless rhythm. I stopped for a moment under the glow of a street lamp, the card Claire had given me pressed inside my wallet. 4 little tools, 4 reminders that panic wasn't the end, only a voice to be heard and managed. And in that stillness, I understood. Fear hadn't ruined me. It had trained me. Every trembling takeoff, every ridiculed panic, every mocking laugh, it had all been the weight that made me stronger. The lesson wasn't about silence or hiding. It was about endurance. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's breathing through it, even when the whole cabin is watching. And from now on, that's who I would be, the man who still feared the sky, but flew anyway.